Lesson 112 starts on page 521 and it's about reducing fractions. When we reduce fractions, we think of writing the fraction with the smallest possible numbers, which is what you learned in Investigation 9. So just keep that in mind. When you think about reducing fractions, think of writing that fraction using the smallest possible numbers. And it's an equivalent fraction. That's what we're trying to write when we write a fraction in reduced form. Remember, we learned about equivalent fractions in Lesson 109. When we reduce a fraction, we're writing that fraction using the smallest possible numbers, and it's an equivalent fraction. For example, 4/8. We talked about that in Lesson 109, and we know that that's the same thing as 1/2. And so we can write that as 1/2. Now, here's something else to think about. If we were trying to reduce 4/8, what we can do is we can divide the top and the bottom, or the numerator and denominator, by the same number to get it into its smallest possible form. And so this one we would divide the top and the bottom by 4. And so we can say, think 4 divided by 4 and 8 divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 would be 1, 8 divided by 4 would be 2, 1/2. Now look at this 4 over 4 that we wrote. Isn't that kind of like a 1? Well, it's not kind of like a 1, it is 1, right? Anytime the numerator and denominator are the same number, that's equal to 1. So just think about this, for example. Think of a whole number. If you took 5 and you divided it by 1, 5 divided by 1 is just going to be 5, right? It's not going to change. It's the same thing here. When we divide a fraction by 1, we don't change the value, but we change the way it looks when it's a fraction. We divide 4/8 by 4 over 4. It changes it to 1/2. It's an equivalent fraction. They're representing the same value. It just looks different. So when we reduce a fraction, we want to divide by 1, and we want to use a fractional equivalent of 1 so that we get the smallest numbers possible for our numerator and denominator. For example, we could have done 4 over 8 and then divided above and below by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4, but that's not the smallest possible form for that. So you always need to kind of check your work and just ask yourself, did I write that in the smallest possible form that I could? So look at practice problem A. 4 divided by 6, or 4/6. Let's reduce that fraction. So we have to divide above and below by the same number. Let's try 2. Since those are both even numbers, let's divide by 2. And so that's the same thing as dividing by 1. And so we say 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, can we reduce that anymore? Well, we have to find a number that's divisible by both the 2 and the 3, and there isn't one. So that is the reduced form, 2/3. 4/12. Let's look at that one. Practice problem B. Let's reduce that. Now let's just think about it. What could we use here? We could use 3's. Let's divide above and below by 3. Well, because we know that 12 divided by 3 equals 4. But 4 divided by 3, that doesn't equal a whole number, so we can't do that. They have to both be whole number results. 4's would work though, right? 4 divided by 4 would work, and so let's do that. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 1/3, we can't get any smaller than that. That's the reduced form of 4/12. Look at C, 3/6. Remember my little hint I gave you in lesson 123? If you can multiply the numerator by 2 and it equals the denominator, then that is an equivalent fraction of 1/2. And you can do that for 3/6, right? Because 3 times 2 equals 6. So we know that that one's 1/2. We don't have to divide by a fraction of 1. Let's do one more. Look at D, 8 over 10. What can we divide above and below by the same number there? Well, they're even numbers. 8 and 10 are even numbers, so let's start with 2. That's an equivalent fraction of 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then we can't get any smaller than that, so that's our reduced form, 4/5. So remember that when we reduce fractions, we are trying to write the fraction using the smallest possible number. We divide the numerator and denominator by the same number. It's just like dividing by 1. And then sometimes we may have to do that more than once if we don't have it in the most reduced form that we can have it in. Okay, well that's all for lesson 112.